Double bind.
Double bind.
Double bind.
Double bind.
Double bind.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Double Bind. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. And this is the state of being Black in the world today. I am your host, Springle, and I have a full house today. Got co-host Boogs in house, co-host Snead, my guest co-host Christina, and guest co-host Tyson, long lost brother of mine. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. You can say hi to our listeners.
Hello, everybody.
Hey, what's
up?
Hey, what's going on?
All right, well, thank you guys for being here. As always, I don't like to linger too long, so let's just get straight into it. I'm gonna have Boogs kind of hit us with the topics, and then we'll see what each and everyone thinks about it.
Yeah, so Charles Blow, I don't know if we're all familiar with him. There was a clip that went viral this week of him on CNN. He has a book that's coming out called Devil You Know, sorry. And he essentially is talking about reversing the Great Migration. So Black people going back to the states of Louisiana, Georgia, and was it Mississippi, Springle?
Yes, Mississippi, and also South Carolina and Virginia.
Okay. Well, he mentioned three, so those are the three I mentioned. And he's talking about Black people, Black Americans specifically, getting back their political power and taking over in a sense. So getting back their political and socioeconomic power and moving back to the southern states in mass numbers. He also pointed out that that's already been happening within the last 10 years. Blacks are moving back from northern states to southern states. So I just kind of wanted to get a feel for my American friends that are on the podcast. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned New Orleans, Louisiana. I love New Orleans, and I wouldn't mind migrating there. It has so much like Caribbean history and culture. I wouldn't mind. I'm all for it.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'm all for it. I think it's important to have unity in numbers and to be represented in a large mass and have control over a certain location and dynamic, so that if you want to have change, you have leverage.
So just hear me out. So I'm Black, obviously.
No, you're not. You're Canadian.
I'm not Black or Canadian. So I'm a Black person. So I represent the diaspora of Blackness, right? So I'm a Black person. I'm born in England. I live in Canada. But my mother is now an American citizen, and I have a sister that's born in the US. So when I listen to Charles Blow talk about Black Americans, it sounds like he's only speaking about those who built the country. And so I'm just, my thinking is, okay, so are we leaving out Black immigrants, first generation American children? Are we leaving them out of the conversation? Are they a part of it, but they're more so at the bottom? Like, firstly, it's the born American who helped build the country.
Well, Book, I'm sorry to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, baby.
I am a first generation American. My family is Caribbean. And one of the reasons why I love Louisiana is because it has so much of the Caribbean culture there, the food. To me, it feels like home. So I wouldn't mind.
Even the cadence they speak with, like their accent, it's very rhythmic like ours. Yeah.
Yes, it is. Yeah, I love it. I absolutely love it. The hospitality, all of that.
A little bit of nerd trivia. You guys know I'm a big fan of like extra trivia. The Louisiana Purchase came about because of Haiti actually freeing themselves from France. So France was about to go broke. And so in some ways, France saved themselves by selling the Louisiana territory, which of course wasn't just the state we know as Louisiana today, but also encompassed a lot of the northern states north of Louisiana, going all the way up, I think, to like Idaho or something. But even within that context, like the Haitians themselves, so many of the slaves in Haiti were shipped to Louisiana region. And so even their Creole is heavily influenced by Haitian Creole. So there's a lot of similarities.
So how do you delineate and then say it's only Black Americans.
I don't think he's only saying that.
There's
From
so many
his point
nuances.
of reference, you can't take what people say like so literal.
But we're all
Because
taken
I don't
away.
feel like he's excluding me.
Tyson, you were saying something?
Yeah, I'm a fan of Charles Blow usually, but in this situation, it sounds good, but like, unless there's opportunities in those areas that will allow our community to grow and prosper, then it doesn't make sense for individuals who may be in the North who are comfortable or doing well to say, hey, because of Charles Blow and his theory, that I should leave the North and move down South and not have the same kind of experience, either financially or whatever, in the South, and assuming that it's going to be some sort of Black utopia because we're not a monolith. And it's a feel-good, nice, easy situation, but I don't see how that is truly realistic. And plus, concentrating our financial as well as economic power into one geographical area, it doesn't have the same leverage as being sort of spread out, but also organizing and getting coalitions with other individuals who may not look like us, but also have our same views.
I call bullshit. I call bullshit.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Christina, because I think you and I are on the same page. I know where you're going with this.
I mean, I just want to respectfully disagree with your entire statement. And I just want to first address this notion of having to have others be involved in our movement and have others involved in our freedom from our Holocaust here in America. I get tired of the notion of that. We need white people. We need Hispanics. We need Asians. We need anybody else but us melanated folks. And I just think if we focus on the unity between us and our dollar and our economic power and what we can do, and if we can concentrate that into, even if it's like one state, I live in the state of Georgia, and Georgia is a superpower. Georgia is a state that's on the coast. It has thousands upon thousands of crops. It has Atlanta, the Yollywood. It has so much more to offer. And it's also like one of the capitals of Black entrepreneurship. And I just feel if we have some communication and some unity between ourselves, we don't need anybody. We don't necessarily need white people to acknowledge themselves and acknowledge their wrong and how they've oppressed us and our fight to get over that oppression. I think that if we just have some kind of unity, and of course, unity doesn't mean that we all agree on the same thing, but it comes to a center and a point and stance of where what's best for people who look like us. And I don't think like having a utopia is impossible. We've had it before. We've had Black Wall Street. We've had all of these communities run by us for us. And it wasn't until the involvement of white people that those communities were torn down.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Sorry, Snead was trying to say something. Go ahead, Snead.
Snead, before you continue, I just want to throw this question specifically at you. And this is interesting because Snead is from the DC, Maryland area. And that culturally is the line that delineates North and South. So where do you stand sort of coming from that kind of geographical location now? Where do you stand with that?
A couple of things before I answer your question. You know, I was laughing when Christina was talking because I think he referred to that as what he said, social justice Coachella, which I thought was amusing and funny. I think I'm going to side with Tyson on this a little bit. I never knew who Charles Blow was. I've been told a couple of days ago. I have been researching and Googling and reading like crazy. And I think it's a great idea if you're looking at it in terms of what could possibly happen. If we're looking at a what if situation, I think there's a lot of steps that need to be made for that type of unification. I really want to read his book first. I really want to read his book before I give a real response, but I think it's a great idea. I'm not against it, but I think we can create that anywhere. I don't know why it's specific to the South or to the North or wherever. I think that if that type of unification happens, it can be widespread, not just in one general localized area.
And that's what I agree. The whole concept of concentrating in one geographical area is probably not the best approach. We can have unity and you leverage technology like we are right now, and that we are unified, we're communicating, we're organizing, we're conversing with each other, and we don't necessarily have to be physically with each other is that we're connected. And that's a concept that I would favor versus just, hey, let's move to South, and that's the great.
Tyson, I got to jump in on this simply because geography is crucial. And I'm going to use some micro examples of that. Chinatowns, Koreatowns, Italian towns, or whatever these ethnic enclaves are in some of these larger cities. There is a reason why people congregate and convene with each other, and they're kind and they're like, because it gives not only a physical sense of safety, it also gives them an emotional and mental sense of safety. And it also helps to the aesthetic and the visual and the optics of seeing your own kind with completely surrounding you within so many different variances of society. Like, these things affect us psychologically. Because if you look at, for example, segregation versus when we're allowed to integrate, as we know historically, when we integrated, that is when our communities really started to plummet. Thank you. Economically, socially, and whatnot, because we felt that if we needed to align ourselves and live amongst whether it's Caucasians, Asians, Hispanics, whomever. I love the idea of geographically having a couple states that where we predominate, where we are in power, or economically we're the ones pulling the strings. Because if we're scattered all over the place, essentially, I think it's harder. And then, of course, the northern and southern cultures there are differences. And the people in the north, technically, the most African Americans in the north, who are historically African American, not first and second generation like most of us here, they have ancestors who came from the South. So all he's speaking on is just a return from whence you came.
Mm-hmm. And I will say, I love the South, and I live in New York. In the South, they are more supportive of my business and just of me as a person. I could be selling whatever, and they're like, oh, because it's you and you're trying to do something, I'm going to support you. In the North, they want a 10-page dissertation as to why they should spend $10 with you. So there's definitely a difference, I feel.
Christina, do you have more orders coming from the South versus the North in terms of your products?
Honestly, I've got a pretty good diversity with my clientele. Though when I'm speaking to people, maybe it's just because I'm Southern, I feel like what my point resonates quicker, and I don't have to explain so much when it's people from the South. I feel like they just kind of get it. They grasp what I'm putting down a lot easier than people from the North. And I definitely agree with Kenya. You know, I've never lived in New York, but I've visited a few times, and I've stayed up there a few times, and people up there are rough. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry.
It's true.
Yeah, and it's like they do really ask for like a 10-page dissertation, and it's just like, why am I constantly having to prove myself when I'm already giving you all this information? Everything that I have to offer is on my site, on my page, on my product. Just give it a try, and if you don't want to, then just leave it alone.
Yeah, well, that's so funny because New Yorkers claim that Washingtonians are the rudest people on the planet, and we're steadily looking at y'all sideways about that.
No, I wouldn't say so. Not at all. I think it's pretty even. I just think I really just think it's the culture.
Is that because there is more competition in the North than the South is? The market, the buying market? No.
The DC is kind of a mix of both, because I find they have that directness that runs from DC to Boston, but then they are incredibly warm when they choose to be in the Southern kind of way. So I feel like they're an amalgamation of both culture.
Yeah, I agree with Neil with this one, because I've been to DC too, and they're a little more bold, but they're definitely someone you can warm up to. Like when I was in New York, there was this girl and she was screaming like someone was bothering her. And you know me, I'm an empath, so I immediately went over and just like, "Are you okay? Are you all right?" And she basically cussed me out and told me to mind my business.
You trying to help me? Why are you trying to help me? I don't know you.
I was shook. Because I'm from Georgia. You know, we have hugs and kisses at the grocery store, and that's a stranger. I was very surprised just by the, not even necessarily animosity, just the rough edges.
So true.
Of people in New York.
So let me ask you this. Getting back to the topic, Let's say, for instance, that this movement actually happened and the South became a booming Black political and economic power. How long before you think that is before the power, the real powers that be, dismantle it?
Well, we know they're going to come.
I feel like that can be answered with another question, is to when will some of our people try to sell us for a white man's dollar? Because that's really what a lot of times it comes down to. It comes down to the Uncle Tom. It comes down to the wolf in sheep's clothing. And it comes down to someone in our community who is not focused on the generational wealth, just the abundance that our people can have. And they focus that simply on themselves and their direct kin. And then they're willing to sell out the rest.
Yeah, it's definitely a mentality. And I noticed that when I'm in the South, I'm definitely not as guarded as I am when I'm in New York. And I can say when I lived in DC and moved back to New York, you know, just seeing another Black person and saying good morning or hello, I felt like, yo, New Yorkers are rude. All I said was hello. I didn't ask you for any personal information. I'm just seeing another Black person and I'm greeting you. And it really took me about 6 months to get acclimated back to New York. And I'm originally a New Yorker.
So Boogs, being that you live in Canada, we talked about this before, you know, hypothetically, as Snead says, we create this incredible social and economical region that's, you know, conducive for Black and melanated folks. You know, it becomes this thriving region, say in 10 years, let's just hypothetically. Is that not something you'd consider? I'm not saying you hate Canada.
Well, that's why I posed the question at the beginning. Does it exclude Black immigrants? And you and I spoke about this, Springle, before, because I felt like being Canadian, I just automatically listening to him, I felt I'm excluded from this conversation. So I don't know if
And what was my response to you? What was my response? I told you no, right? I feel like he's just speaking as a space, right, on a space for us. I'm glad that you're talking about this, because this is something I sometimes bump heads with people who are true African Americans completely. When they talk about, you know, for example, Issa Rae, I've seen comments where she ain't really us. She can't speak for us early in her days of Insecure.
Yeah, I see it too.
Or just other people who either have parents from outside. But I'm like, yo, Malcolm X, who everyone loves, his mother was from my country. Marcus Garvey, who is lauded here, he also has a background being born in Jamaica. You have Shirley Chisholm, Barbados. So I think we need to, on a bigger scale, just as I think it was Christina that mentioned, Tyson had mentioned we're not a monolith. That is part of the problem. Because on a global scale, other groups are not looking at us, Kenya's a Reuben, she's not really like Neil, who's from Grenada, or Christina, right, whose background is Nigerian and these things. They just look at us as one group. And I think in that sense, groupthink can benefit us, because if we can stay on code and not be those coons that sell us out / turn their backs on their community, I think that can help us. So I think that sort of situation, to be able to create a space for us, all of us, no matter what part of the diaspora we're from, in this particular country, I think that would be a huge boon to us overall.
Well, let's just see how Freedom Georgia turns out, and then we can revisit this conversation in 10, 20 years.
For those who don't know what Freedom Georgia is, can you please enlighten us?
Well, I'm sure the people who actually live in the South are already aware of this. The Freedom Georgia Institute, when 19 Black families bought over 90 acres of land in the town of Toomsboro, I think it is.
Toomsboro.
Yeah.
I love that.
No?
Yes, I heard about it. I was super excited when I saw it.
They said they will open their doors to everyone, but it's specifically for us, so we can kind of reap the benefits of building our communities and becoming this power. I'm really upset that there's not as much. Well, what the hell am I saying? Of course, there's not a whole bunch of coverage about it. Why would we want to celebrate Black success? Well, what am I talking about? There's not a whole lot of content. You're really going to have to look for it. But the information that I've found, if it's possible, I think would be a great thing. I want to go back to something Christina said about the compromised Black mind. And how many, I think the question is, how many of that type outweighs the people who want change and to see the community thrive?
I think they represent a very small number. They're definitely out there, but I feel like if you don't give power to those kind of people, then there is a point where there is always a sellout. There's always that one in the group who's really not a part of it. And though they're there and though they can...
And their voices are magnified.
Yeah, well, I just feel like if they're magnified, it's only magnified by the people who are willing to listen. It's only magnified by the people who are even willing to entertain the buffoonery.
I don't know, because when you're saying that, Candace Owens jumps into my head, and I'm not willing to listen to her, but she's everywhere.
Right. But Candace Owens, I mean, didn't she just have a baby and she got dragged by white media? You know, Candace Owens is a person who is one of the Uncle Toms and Uncle Ruckuses who is coming to a head with her BS. She had a whole baby with her white man, and now they're calling her baby a niglet. They're saying she's not fit to be a mother. And these are white folks. These are not even Black people coming at her like this. These are the same people that she's out here, you know, portraying her own folk to entertain. So with Candace Owens, I feel like she's a great example, but I feel like if our people are not listening to her, who are entertained by her ruckusness, then it really doesn't necessarily affect us because they have that view of us anyway.
And that's a good way to segue into the second topic, which was interracial coupling in the media. Let's be specific. Snead, I know you wanted to address this for a long time, so I'm going to have you lead out on it.
Yeah, I just have noticed an abundance of just commercials, TV shows, advertisements where it is just a bunch of interracial couples. And, you know, I don't have any children, but I always, when I see things like that, I always think about, what if I had some little Sneads running around here and all they saw on TV or on the internet or whatever were mixed couples? I don't know how I feel about that. Like, I think it's important, although I can kind of understand it from a marketing perspective, but just from a personal perspective, I don't know if I am pleased or comfortable with this into the masses. Like, I think it's important for Black people to see other Black people together as couples.
No, I agree. But there's also the demographic that it isn't represented. So like my family member and her friends, majority of them are mixed. So for that demographic obviously we all are not from a mixed family, but for those who are having that representation that is, you know, not overboard, but having some representation, father is white, mother is Black or vice versa, or Asian or Latin, and having that kind of like, wow, you know, this is a representation of me and seeing me on the big screen, small screen or whatever. And we all need to see that. We all need to see us as those who are not from mixed family. And we also need those who are from mixed family.
I hate to say this, and I don't want to sound ugly, so if I offend anybody, I'm sorry. Wait your turn. Yeah, that's it. Those mixed families, and they need their representation. That's fantastic, but wait your turn. I don't feel that we as Black families have seen an abundance of that. It's always something thrown into the mix. Now, you know, I agree. Representation across the board is important. Unfortunately, you can't get everybody all the time. Let us get ours first before you can start rising up just a little bit.
Yeah, I agree with Snead on this one. It does sound a little biased, but I'm right there with him. In all honesty, to an extent, we don't really see almost any Black couples together. We don't see a lot of Black on Black love. And even with mixed race children and their need to be represented, I acknowledge that. But there is a privilege that they have that a majority of their community does not have because of their lightness. Colorism benefits people while it also can tear other people down. And I've been really trying to just peep game on the subliminal message that each advertisement has. And when I see a Black woman, she's almost always either a single woman with kids or she's with a white man. And it's almost always a light-skinned woman. And when we see dark-skinned women in the media, it's most of the time they're single. And so I feel like with the representation of light-skinned people or mixed race people, there's a lot of representation from them already out there. So at this point, I feel like they've already had their turn and we're still waiting for ours.
Just to piggyback on both what Snead and Christina said, I'm listening and I'm thinking and I'm just like, well, Black people have been oppressed the longest of any group race on this planet for history. Now we're at the point where the world is saying, let's have unity. That word is thrown around a lot lately. Let's have unity. But it's like, you can't have unity without accountability. And in order to have accountability, we need to have that representation that was stolen from us. So let's have that now. Yeah. And then we can have everybody mixing together. You can't just skip it over and then say, oh, isn't it great? We have all different races all blended together on television and representation. It's like, no. But you just skipped over us. Because I can't think of any, and I'm talking positive, like where we're not drug addicts and we're not prostitutes and all of those negative stereotypes. I can't think of any show where I saw a Black household on television that looked like mine outside of the Cosby
exactly.
Show.
And even they ruined the legacy of the Cosby Show.
Destroyed, obliterated.
But they don't know what to do with us. I'm a dark-skinned Black performer with natural hair, and they don't know what to do with me. And I'm one of the rare people when I'm on set and they don't get my hair or my makeup right, I'm like, this is not right. I'll take it off and I will do it myself.
Mm-hmm. And see, Kenya, you shouldn't have to do that.
Exactly. And trust me, I tell them that too. I'm like, how do you have Black actors and actresses and you don't have makeup artists and hair stylists that knows how to do my hair? If you're a Black makeup artist or hairstylist, you have to know how to do everybody's hair. How come it isn't the same way with others?
So I'm going to throw in this question here, and I want you guys to give me I know it's a much multi-layered, ultra nuanced topic, but if we can, I'd prefer a simpler answer. Do we believe that the proliferation of the interracial couple imagery that we see in the media and commercials and TV and whatnot, do we believe that is a deliberate agenda to sort of dilute the stronger, more Afro features?
I believe,
or do we believe it's part of...
That's a question.
Boogs, what about you? You think it's an agenda, or do you think it's just from a marketing standpoint?
It's both, because if you think about even when they cast Black women in major movies, and I'm thinking Tandy Newton, I'm thinking Halle Berry, they do not have the broad nose, they don't have the dark skin, and they don't have the natural hair. So forget the interracial part. Let's talk about the Black women that they have used in the past. They're all light skinned, right? They all conform to, and it's all looked at. I was just going to say, Tyson is very. Lens.
Yeah. Out of all my friends, he is one of the more. I sometimes joke and call him a Jew, simply because he's just so great with business. He's very business minded. Tyson, do you believe all of this is coming from a marketing standpoint, which in your mind, I'm sure might be positive because it's about generating, money and capital for those business entities? Or do you believe it may be a little bit more insidious, like they're actually trying to just kind of dilute us out, like the way they do in South America and in Latin America, where they purposely, wanted to mix to dilute the Black blood? What do you think?
No,
not at all. Business mind is not
joking. It's a joke. I think it's marketing. I don't think it's, I could be wrong, obviously. It's really marketing, because you have, for our people, seeing a representation regardless of the hue of the person, we're happy. And from their perspective, from a non-us perspective, they're like, well, if it has to be someone that's not us or them, they'll prefer someone light. So from a marketing perspective, it's a win-win, but it's messed up. I don't say everyone's appeased, but a larger majority are appeased on both sides if the other side is willing to accept someone that's not them from marketing perspective. Yeah. Also,
from a performer's perspective, there was a show called, they they didn't have too many Black people on there. And someone said to me, well, we hire you, you're dark skinned, so you cover the black demographic. Like, they said that to me. Also, last night I was on a Clubhouse call with agents and casting directors. And one young lady was asking a question about her friend who I think is Middle Eastern. And the casting director was like, oh, that's great. That's a win-win for her because she can be ethnically ambiguous and she can play a Spanish person. She can play Black. She can play whatever. So I'm sitting there like, wow. And this is a Black casting director that got excited because this woman is not Black, but could be casted as Black.
Wow.
Speaking of Black women in the industry, in the entertainment industry, who celebrated their Blackness, let's honor our great empress who has passed away, Cicely Tyson. I don't know how many of you are familiar with her, but how has she affected you? She was out there making movies long before any of us was born. You know what I mean? So some people may not be as fully familiar with her. So
I have so much, respect and admiration and just everything for this woman. I saw her on Broadway, A Trip to Bountiful, with Vanessa Williams and Blair Underwood. And even though I work in the theater and I may have a little bit more access to seeing shows multiple times than, the average person, she never missed a show. And this woman was like on it all the time. And even she had to have been in her 80s. And it was just such a remarkable thing to see. And I'm just like, it's so inspiring. You have no excuse for nothing. I don't want to throw Glenda Jackson in here, but she was another one. These much, much older people out acting everybody on the stage, nonetheless. Like, just a marvel. And it's really, really sad. I'm just gonna, I don't know. Like, it just hits different, when it's someone who is, as iconic and just culturally inspiring to just, pass.
Yeah, I think she was an icon, a queen, a trailblazer, an example for young boys and girls. She did so much for our culture, so much for the industry. I was watching a few different clips. I always go down this rabbit hole when celebrities I look up to pass away, just to get like their life's journey. I always get an inspiration from it, just like Chadwick Boseman. But Cicely Tyson did an interview with Don Lemon, and they were talking about Rosa Parks. And Cicely Tyson said to Don that young people that she talks to, and she'll talk to young people, and they'll challenge her about the Rosa Parks story. Like, Rosa Parks really wasn't sitting on the bus. And she said to Don, the young people are starting to become, I guess, complicit in the erasure of history. They really don't believe these things, these stories that are being passed down. They don't believe them because they never witnessed it, or they're not being told it accurately. And she said that's one thing that she doesn't like about the next generation, is because they're not welcoming or keeping these stories alive. And it's so important to do that. So, and then she went on to share some more stories. But I kind of found it sad, but also kind of true. If you traffic on social media these days and factual content is put out and historicized, people will challenge it and say it's not real. Like, in the comments, they'll go back and forth and say it's not real. And then they traffic in misinformation and disinformation and about things that really happened in our past. And it's so sad because we're erasing a huge part of our history. We're essentially erasing what made us, and we're disrespecting those that came before.
Christina, do you find your contemporaries within your age group, do you find that they're, as Boogs stated, they're sort of erasing or are they ignorant of some historical facts that, deal with us as Black people in this country, or even just Black historical history?
I'm so ashamed to say, partly. I think it's a good mix, in all honesty. Like, almost every generation, there's a group who really just doesn't care about history, doesn't really care about being involved and being just living a life that will benefit them, but also their people, and honoring, the ones who have come before us and acknowledging their fight and acknowledging what they've gone through, just simply for us to have people my age who don't necessarily appreciate, or even to the point don't really care.
The first thing I thought of was when she started making movies. This was in the 70s, I believe, when it wasn't necessarily cool to be Black and proud of your skin. I just think, like, what has she gone through? Because here we are in 2021 and I'm still through bullshit. So I could just imagine the things that she had to endure during those times just to get her auditions.
I just have to say this, now that, we are our trailblazers and icons and legends, our Black icons are thinning. Who's next? Who's going to be the next person? And what are we going to do going forward to honor those legacies and those sacrifices for these people who have made these opportunities, even though we may seem that they're scarce as it is right now, but it's a lot more than what it was. What are we going to do to keep that ball rolling?
Right. That's a great question.
Yeah. To piggyback on that, I think what Christina was saying, and it's a phrase that Joe Madison says, everyone can do something. Instead of waiting for this iconic leader to lead us, everyone is a leader in their own sphere of influence. And that it's important that, you do, I don't say little things, but you do what you can. And if everyone does that and everyone does their part, we are moving forward and not waiting on our laurels and saying, hey,
right.
As Springle mentioned, that our political leaders are thinning out, that we're sitting around waiting to be led instead of being, I know what I can do, whether it be political or economic or socially, or even just using my network to get other folks connected to other people who I already know. Even if I don't do anything, I'm just a facilitator, and just do that. And that can move the needle forward.
I agree with Tyson. Everybody can use their own talents for good.
Amen. And guess what we're doing right here on this podcast?
Well said. Snead, you also wanted to honor some other now ancestors who've passed away recently. Can we throw those names out?
Yes. We would like to also speak about Hank Aaron, Sekou Smith, and John Chaney. These are all legends, trailblazers, and icons in the Black culture. Hank Aaron, also known as Hammering Hank, was a legendary baseball player who actually broke Babe Ruth's all-time home record in 1974. He had 23 years in the league. Sekou Smith was an award-winning NBA reporter and analyst, and John Chaney was a legendary basketball coach at Temple University who won more than 500 games and 6 Atlantic tournaments. And he took his team to the NCAA regionals 5 times. And they all passed this month, 2021. So it's just like, these are people who have opened doors, changed lives, inspired, changed the world, and they are no longer with us, and they just need to be acknowledged.
Thank you to Kenya for returning to the fold. Tyson returning to the fold. Christina's back on it, as always, straight out the box, the fire star. And then, of course, Boogs, my co-host, and my co-host Snead. We thank you guys for listening and listening in. I'm talking faster than I'm thinking. Thank you for tuning in. Check out our social media platforms and expect a new episode next. Thank you for tuning in. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and now Clubhouse, as well as all major streaming platforms. Don't forget to hit like, share, and subscribe. And we'd love to hear from you, so leave us a comment.